Hi there, jazz connoisseurs. Yes, it's me, Roger Lee, aka the Jazz Cat, and I'm back with you again for another fabulous show this evening. Before we start, I've got to say a quick hi to the Jazz Moods listeners on the Voice Radio North Devon, the Jazz Lovers Corner with Rose Lady Edmonds from Georgia, United States of America. We also got the London Jazz Scene newsletter, Jazz Across the Pond, of course, and the Smooth Jazz Train out of Richmond, Virginia with my very good friend Kevin Goolsby, Mr. G, the Devon Link Live and the Smooth Jazz Appreciation Society. A very good evening to you all and all other listeners all over the whole world. A fabulous show for you tonight, and unusual for us, but we're going to be playing a track. We're going to open up before we actually welcome our guest star tonight, and it's a track from his brand new album, Sunday Somewhere, his 24th solo album, and this track is called Overtime.
Overtime, the thing I've got to do. I'm working overtime. Anything I do, it's all for you. Days are so long, I've got to have the strength to push on through. It's worth it for your love. I do it for your time to keep it real and new. Days that feel so hard, I think about you just to get me by. If I don't get it done, overtime will keep me from you. I will die. Oh, with my baby, it's where I want to be now. It's where I just belong. Drive me crazy, got to have your love. I'm working overtime, overtime, the things I got to do. Whoa, working overtime, anything I do, it's all for you. I've got to have the strength to push on through. It's worth it for your love. I do it for your time to keep it real and new. Times it's so hard, I think about you just to get me by. If I don't get it done, overtime will keep me from you. I will die. I'm working overtime. Overtime's the things I got to do. That got to do for you. Get overtime. Overtime. Anything I do, it's all for you.
listening to the opening track of my featured artist tonight, a track from his brand new album, Someday Somewhere, his 24th solo album. It's called Overtime, and I just felt that was such a point and proper way to start an interview with my featured artist. As a welcome return back to Jazz on the Moods with us, with my very dear friend. It's Patrick Yandall. A very good evening.
Oh, thanks for having me. Honored to be here again.
It's a pleasure. You're actually the first person to come back and join us. You were with us, I think it was last year, the year before, when you released the wonderful album Jazz on the Vine, and we had a great chat about it. An album which I actually nominated in the top 20 of my favorite albums of last year.
That's an honor. I saw that, and I reposted it to everybody. Let them know. Thank you.
Anyway. Great to see you, ringing in from San Diego, California. I bet the weather's a bit nicer in San Diego than it is in England at the moment.
It hit 80 yesterday, and they said it's going to hit 80 again. It's kind of warm.
Right, that's the end of the interview then.
Okay.
You're making us feel very jealous here. Anyway, Patrick Yandall, born in North Carolina, United States, is a top American smooth jazz guitarist. You were raised in Bay City, Michigan. Growing up in a military family, it wasn't easy for you, I believe, in a world of constantly changing. So where did your love of music come from? I know you had your father was a musician in the military, and he had a love of jazz. But so was he your main influence? Did he open your eyes to jazz music?
He opened my eyes into playing instruments. It was more, I had older brothers that were, some of them were 10 years older than me, and they were listening to a lot of Motown and rock and everything like that. And since the guitars were laying around, instruments from my dad were laying around, I picked them up very early, probably third, fourth grade, and started trying to learn some songs. And one brother loved rock, like someone like Robin Trower, and another brother loved soul and R&B, like Earth, Wind and Fire's early stuff. And, so I had all those influences flown into my head every day from those guys. So it really helped out.
It must have been really interesting household as you walked past all their bedroom doors, all the different genres of music that was coming out of them.
Yes. And like I said, one brother, he must have had a garage full of albums by the time he was done, but all, vinyl. And he went from everything from Led Zeppelin to a bunch of groups like Soft Machine from over in the UK that I really used to listen to, because Alan Holdsworth was a guitar player that I grew up loving. And he was in that group way back in the 70s. So yeah, stuff like that just was playing in the house all the time.
Well, you've alluded there to your early days, because of course you quickly learned to let your music do the talking. And I'm right in saying, if we've done our research correctly, we're usually pretty good, that you were playing the trumpet in 4th grade, which provided you with an escape from the loneliness of your nomadic life. So what exactly was that all about, the learning the trumpet? And how did you go from the trumpet, the transition, over to the wonderful guitar which you play?
Yeah, we had just moved to Michigan when I was in 4th grade, and sure enough, the music classes, you had to pick up an instrument. It was a Catholic school, and they said, pretty much you're going to play something to all the students. So for some reason, the trumpet was there, and I thought, well, I'll try that. And I had already started playing a little guitar, but that wasn't one of the choices the nuns gave us. They said, so the trumpet, I thought, well, I'll give it a try. And it was pretty fun. I stuck with it for a couple of years, but I kept gravitating back towards the guitar, and that's what I stuck with. It was my first love, put it that way, and I still in love with it.
And it's interesting you say that, because when you listen, I mean, I've got a large selection of your CD. I love the music, but there's a brass influence there, and that must come from the Earth, Wind and Fire days with the brass punctuation. So I think you still got the love of the brass and the trumpet and the trombones and saxophones, even though you're at the front with the guitar and that. So you can see that.
Yeah, definitely.
What a lot of people may not realize, but it was a freak football accident when, sadly, you broke your hip. And that, in 6th grade, that changed your whole career, because you could have potentially been a football player. We're talking American football, yes?
Yes. And I don't know how good I would have been, but yeah, it was early, and broken hip. And it was kind of a game within the football game that we used to play, and broke the hip. But one thing it did, I had back in those days, it wasn't a go and get your hip fixed and get out. It was a 3-month stay in the hospital.
Yeah.
So my dad brought me a couple instruments, and I had 3 months downtime. And so that's when I really started playing and listening and learning a lot about music itself, and when I came out of there, I was pretty proficient at some things, a lot of things on guitar, really. So that kind of started my career off.
Well, the loss to the football world was the gain to the music world.
Yeah. I don't know how well I would have ended up playing the game, but I still love.
And I mean, yeah, excuse the pun, but hip hip hooray for the jazz music world.
When it's hip, yeah, that's what that one album that I had, When It's Hip, that was kind of, about my hip, and a fellow guitarman, Terry Woolman, had just had his hip replaced. So I was trying to guide him, since I had mine replaced, and help him out with a little advice. He was calling me for some advice on his hip. So that's where that album kind of came from.
Yeah. You mentioned a couple of names there, because after your family finally settled in Michigan, after traveling around and touring around, at a very young age, you fell in love with the very progressive styles of, and there were names that we've come across like Jimi Hendrix, Steely Dan. I know you're a big Steely Dan fan, and you actually, on your album Soul Grind, you did a great cover of Josie from Asia. So I know you're a Steely Dan fan. George Benson. Now, George Benson, again, on another of your albums, you did a wonderful breezing, a lovely cover of that. And we did a thing a couple of years ago on the Jazz Mood, where we looked at all the different versions from George Benson's cover from the original version, which was done back in 1970, which a lot of people think that George Benson was the original version, and of course it wasn't. Gabor Sadovur, and the Hungarian guitarist who did the original with Tommy Lupumo, and then, of course, he then produced George Benson. But we did every week for about 6 weeks, and we did a version. Your version was one of the weeks, and that, and great version. So some of the names there, of course, Stevie Wonder, Rufus, and these were definitive influences in your early days of your career, weren't they?
Yes, in Michigan, Stevie Wonder and a whole bunch of soul R&B artists came out of the Saginaw, Detroit area especially. And to this day, there's a lot of musicians that live out here in California that are from Michigan, Detroit area, and around there. And actually, at one time, my whole band in California was made up of ex-Michigan natives. So yeah, there's quite a lot of influence, and like you said, the big names that came out of there. If you're growing up in Michigan, we heard a lot of their music.
Oh, yeah. You could. Well, a few weeks ago we interviewed Alta Rene, and she's from Michigan, and of course Tim Bowman and that. So yeah. But then, am I right in saying? Let's see if we've done our real homework about yourself. Apparently, it was attending a concert of Jeff Lorber with a very, very young Kenny G and an equally young Roy Ayers, and you were in the audience, and that was really a life-changing moment for you. It was like a light bulb moment for you. Is that correct?
It really was. I had been playing in bands and studying guitar and everything already. I was already playing in nightclubs when I was in 9th grade. And my older brother, Mike, who was a big Roy Ayers fan, said, hey, let me take you to a concert and, see if you like this kind of stuff. And he was very good about it. And, exposing me to a lot of different styles of music. But then we went to Roy Ayers, and then about a month later, I really liked it. But he took a month later, he said, hey, there's this guy, Jeff Lorber, coming. And I said, I've heard some of this stuff. He said, I'm going to take you to his concert. So again, he took me to that one. And that was the light bulb. That's what I just came out of that. And like you said, Kenny G, who was Kenny Gorlick back then, was up on stage with them. And he had torn jeans and a T-shirt on. You haven't seen him like that in a while. But after every solo he played, it was just almost like a standing ovation. He was that good. And Lorber's songs really hit a chord with me. And I had been listening to his first album, Water Sign. And that, again, it just seeing him perform it live. Again, after that, I came out of it thinking, okay, this is what I want to do with my life. And I've stuck with it ever since.
Well, I hate to beat you slightly, but apparently what you were saying about when you were touring and you were in these adult clubs and you were at the tender age of 13 and homing your wonderful art and the rest of it, I said to you, I was 12 and I was working in clubs, and I was learning my art at that stage. And they're very strict in the UK about people underage drinking it. So where I used to work, I was by the fire escape, and so if the police came in the front, they'd push me out the fire escape.
Yeah, with me though, on breaks, most of the club owners knew I was underage. I had to leave the club. This was in Michigan, and sometimes it was in the winter. I had to go stand outside or go sit in a car for 15, 20 minutes before the next set started. So yeah, it was interesting in Michigan playing in clubs at that young age. And then some days it was during the week, and I had to go to high school. It was a high school the next day, and I had to. My mom and dad said, you can do these clubs, but there's never going to be a time the next, if it was after a Thursday night, that you could say, oh, I'm too tired. You're going to school no matter what. And that was the agreement I had. And that's how it started.
I had a similar agreement as well. It was like, no excuses for being tired for school. You're going. If you want to do that, but you go. But I mean, and that is, of course, like anybody who starts in that early young age, that was the ground. I learned so much in those early young years, and it was the backbone of where I am today. Anyway, so there we are. In 1980s, you then left the family home and you moved to San Diego. And now, please tell me you weren't influenced to go to San Diego because of the beaches and the hot sun.
Well, for a brief moment, we lived here. My dad was stationed here when I was really young, like kindergarten, first grade age. And my brothers, once they got old enough in Michigan, it was like, we're going back to California. So my oldest brother, Ed, brought me, said, if you want to come back to California, come back and you can live with me while you look for what you want to do, and he knew I was into music, and he actually had a couple connections out here in San Diego. So when I moved back after I attended a college for a while in Michigan, when I moved out here, the music career kind of picked up really quickly for me, since a couple connections were here, and then people wanted to have me on their albums up in LA and stuff. So everything kind of really, really picked up when I moved out to San Diego and in LA.
And of course, it was in 1992 you had your first solo album with That Feels Nice. And then, of course, so from your very first album, what we're going to do now, because I'm consciously aware that the listeners are watching us, listening to yourself, and maybe going, okay, well, what does this guy sound like? What is his music? They may not be au fait with your music. So we're just going to take a quick interlude and actually break away. And I've done a medley of 4 of your tracks from your wonderful new album, Someday Somewhere. So the listeners listening will be straight back with this interview with the wonderful Patrick Yandall. Have a listen to this. Here's a medley of Someday Somewhere.
They just hypnotize. They just hypnotize. I'm caught up in your eyes. Caught up in your eyes. Can you feel me now? I'm caught up in your eyes. In your eyes.
Oh, there we are. There's a medley of some wonderful tracks from my featured artist tonight, Patrick Yandall. The album is called Someday Somewhere. It's a great album, but it's an album where you really have taken a change in direction. There's a lot of singing, a lot of vocal on it now, as opposed to most of the other albums, which are purely jazz instrumentals. Why the change in direction on this one?
This album will probably be the only one that is like that ever for me. But I was asked by a music library that uses my music in film and TV, and they said, do you have any do you produce any vocal stuff? And it just so happened I had been toying with the idea. My son is in college and he loves hip hop and the R&B, and every time he'd play me a tune that a lot of it I really liked, but I could tell there was a voice enhancer on there, kind of not the strong auto tune that sounds like you're singing through your nose, but you could tell there was an adjustment. And I actually have some of the equipment that's used on some of those albums, so I started messing around with it. And I'm not the greatest singer, but I could hold the tune very in tune with the equipment. Yep. So I started working on that music, and I worked on a whole project for them because they had some movies and some TV stuff they needed it for. And when I thought, well, I'll submit it and see what they say. And they came back to me and said, we love it. It's definitely going to be used in some of their projects. So then I thought, I actually asked them, I said, would it be okay to put out for an album? And they said, definitely, it's your material. You do what you want with it from here on. So, and that's where it came from,
Well, that's it, because about 6 months ago, we interviewed Peter White from San Diego as well. And he just released the music for Starlex Airlines. And I asked him, I said, why? And they'd approached him. They said, can you do some music for the airlines? And they then enabled him to release it. Back to your career then. Can you remember where you were the first time when you were in your house or driving a car and you heard a piece of your music on the radio? Can you remember the first time?
Yeah, my first really big release was called A Lasting Embrace on Brainchild Records. I had been signed with those guys. And, when I got on there, Kilauea and Russ Freeman from the Rippington were on there, and some other big names, Greg Vale. And it was just a great label and experience for me. And that album, they released One Perfect Moment from that. And I think it was 1998. And we had gone up to LA just to visit some relatives and kind of spend some time up there. But on our way back, we were coming along the ocean, and on the wave up in LA, we were listening to, and all of a sudden it came on, and my wife looked at me and said, that's pretty cool. And so it was kind of a goosebump moment, it really was nice. And then people started calling me from back east. Hey, we just heard you on, this was kind of early in my career, when things, I wasn't used to this stuff. And it was pretty nice time in life there.
And you didn't crash the car?
I wasn't driving. Good thing. I might have, my wife was driving. I was just looking out the window when it came on. And yeah, it was very nice. And, the guy came on, I can't remember who was on the wave back then, but he came on and said, this is one of our brand new tracks that everybody's loving. And it was just a nice moment. So.
Now, another one, of course, Mr. Fatburger, not Fatburger as in the band, but Mr. Fatburger appeared in the film Fruitvale Station. And it's from your great album, A New Day. It really is. Yeah. How did that come about, to be featured in a film? How did that happen?
Again, it was a different music library that had used my stuff before for different projects, but they approached me and they actually let me know what the film was about. And it's, in these racial tension times, it was even back then, some things were going on. They approached me about it and asked me if it was okay. And I said, definitely, yes, let's put it where you need it in there. And so it was nice, and going to the movie theater and seeing, watching the movie and just loving the movie. And then at the end credits, seeing that was my first time, because my music had been used in some movies before, but this was the first feature film that, you know, that it was at a lot of theaters, and we went and saw it. So back then it was a pretty nice thing to see back then.
Well, I'm one of these people. I've grown up and I love music from films. Sometimes music from films is better than some music you can buy. I mean, and I'm the person in the cinema. All right. At the end of the film, as soon as it says the end, 99% of the audience get up and walk out. I'm the person who's sitting there right to the end, seeing the credits go by, and who sang the song. Meanwhile, the cleaner's coming in trying to tie it, and I'm still sitting there. And my wife's going, "Can we go now?" I go, "No, just a minute." And it means a lot to me, so I know exactly where you're coming from.
You're a true music lover, because I like to do that, but sometimes I'm leaving with everybody I'm with is like, "Well, let's get out of here. Let's go get a drink or something." You know?
Now, your music has appeared, as you've already alluded to, on television and news broadcast. The single "Tower of Soul" from your album "The Window," brilliant. I love this album. This is frequently being played on the show. From 2010, that went on to the #1 for 5 weeks on the Smooth Jazz Now chart, and it reached #1 on the live 365 Smooth Jazz radio chart. So amazing. Great stuff. Now, the album, which I love, is From the Ashes, 2004, and it featured Randy Brecker and Will Lee, amongst others. But have you got a bucket list of artists that you would love to join or feature and play with at all?
Oh, definitely. You know, there's cats out now. It's funny, I opened for Boney James one time, and there were guys in my band that had toured with him or played with him before. So it was kind of nice, and he's just a nice cat, and I just love his playing a lot. So he's one. I only got to play briefly on stage with Jeff Lorber at a place called Humphreys in San Diego. And so, but I'd love to work with him, you know, actually play a concert with him or do a project with him. He's, you know, like you said earlier about the story, and I gave you the story about him kind of changing my life once I heard him. So he's definitely one. And there's a whole bunch of others, you know. Chick Corea, rest in peace. That would have been the ultimate performance, you know, be able to play with him. But guys like that, that's just a few, but there they are.
Some wonderful names there, and cross fingers, hopefully eventually the phone will ring and they'll be, listen, because there are some wonderful artists who are doing duet albums now and that.
Yes.
You listen, you go, this is great stuff. Why isn't this happened before? And that, you know, and there's some wonderful names out there and that. So you're a session musician in San Diego, Los Angeles, New York, New Jersey, and you've appeared on the Weather Channels, also with the 8A segments. Now, musical influence, I know we spoke briefly about George Benson. Where would you, if anyone was to listen to your music, where would your influence come from? We've alluded to some of your taste, which is varied so much over the albums, but would you say that, there's a little bit of a George Benson feel to some of my styles of playing?
Definitely. Yeah, he was, when I heard him, my dad had some old recordings of him, and I used to hear him and Wes Montgomery together. I really fell in love with their kind of playing. But I was a young kid, so the rock influence was there. So some of the musical approaches they were using, I tried to put more like a rock spin on it. That's why later on in life, I fell in love with like Larry Carlton and Lee Ritenour and all those cats. They just, you know, and then when Metheny came along, kind of blew my mind for a long time. I think a lot of us guitar players, you know, wanted to play like him, and you hear that sound a lot of times. You're wondering, is that Pat? No, that's not Pat, but it's very close, you know. So guys like him, but Larry Carlton really struck a chord, because it was like kind of like Benson, but with that bluesy rock flavor. So like you mentioned before, Steely Dan, that's, you know, that kind of music, and Larry's playing, that's really where I come from, a deep love of that place.
I mean, you obviously, you've got your own style and technique, you know, but certainly, I mean, you mentioned Metheny, and I know the frequent listeners to Jazz Moods and Jazz Across the Pond know that I'm a massive Pat Metheny. In the wall behind me, there's a whole section down here of all Pat Metheny music, and Still Live Talking was a lifeboat changing moment for me. I listened to that, and I've never heard anything like it before. It was like incredible.
I agree.
Your focus has always been to create more music and improve as a guitarist, composer, producer, engineer, and multi-instrumentalist. Your music is everywhere, and you have always been your goal to seriously and to proliferate yourself as a musician. Do you feel that you've accomplished this, or do you feel that it's on every day, it's another challenge, and you're still progressing to get to that point?
To me, it's still progressing. Yeah, there's been, I was lucky enough to get some time with Mike Stern, a guitar player out of Boston, played it with Miles Davis, and he said, you know, as much when you think you know a lot of music, the next day you're realizing there's so much more to learn, and it is every day. I try to learn a few things, tonally, harmonically, guitar-wise, and then try to use it in music, you know. So every day it's a learning experience. I don't think it'll ever end, you know. The day I croak, I'll still be probably trying to learn, you know, some Miles Davis licks, or so, you know, again. And then you hear guys like Scott Henderson over the years, and it makes you, and Alan Holdsworth, and it makes you just want to go practice, you know. It's a guy like that, and Mike Stern, and who I got to meet him when I was very young in Boston, and he kind of set me on a path towards that way, incorporating the rock styles with the jazz, and you know, again, ever since then, it's been kind of a avenue I've always tried to travel down it as much as possible.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, a couple of years ago, I heard an interview. Regrettably, I didn't conduct the interview. I heard the interview with Pat Metheny, and he went several years ago. He went to his child's school to play, and they wanted him to play "Twinkle Twinkle Little Star." And apparently, he was about 2 hours back there warming his fingers up before he even went on to do that. And I was thinking, but this is Pat Metheny. Surely you can just pick a guitar. But no, you know, total respect there. Now. Yeah. We're here primarily to promote your wonderful new album. Tell everybody about your fabulous new album, Someday Somewhere. Now, we've already spoken about why the vocals are, but the sleeve, where did the influence in because it's a totally different sleeve. When you look at it, you look at some of the other ones where you feature on the front of it. So where did the idea come for the new cover?
That's actually a chalk drawing of my niece who lives in Michigan, at Lily, and when I first saw that picture, I thought it was a painting or something, and so I contacted my niece. I said, "Where did your daughter Lily? She's actually a grandniece." I said, "What is that? Where?" And she said, "You know, Lily drew it on the sidewalk with chalk, and she's done a bunch of, and she's only." Going into 8th grade, I think. And every time I saw some of her drawings, I thought, that's just beautiful. And this one kind of struck it with me. And I had started working on the Someday Somewhere. And I thought I was going to put most of the time it's a picture of me with a guitar or something on the cover. But I saw that and I thought, that kind of fits the album's title, Someday Somewhere. It looked like it could be anywhere. It could be in space. It could be somewhere on Earth, So when I saw that, I asked her, I said, do you think she'd mind if I used her creation for an album cover? And she came back and said she would just love it. So again, big thanks to her, Lillian Graves out in Michigan, that, drew it on the sidewalk with chalk.
I do hope you're going to pay us some royalties.
No, that actually her mom was kidding me about that. I said, yeah, I'll give her, I told her I'd give her some of my streaming royalties. I think that turns out to be 1/1000th of a cent or something like that.
Patrick, it is always a joy to talk to you, and we love your music. Whenever we play it on the radio, whether it's Jazz Across the Pond or jazz music and that, it always gets great feedback. I know that Kevin Goolsby features tracks of yours and that. It's always a great pleasure to talk to yourself and that. Thank you so much for taking time out of your Californian day to come and join us and that. And you can go back out to the 80 degrees now, enjoy the nice weather.
I'm working on the new album, new instrumental album, so I'm going back to that.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, keep us informed on that one.
I will.
And because, we love to be the first on the block to get out of there and play some of your new music and that. So
you guys are first.
We're going to be finishing off. We're going to play your interview with Marcus Street from the Off Two Cities album. Yeah. So we'll play the interview out of that. But meanwhile, Patrick, an absolute joy. Lovely. We can't wait to get out of this pandemic we find ourselves in, and then we'd love to you come and join us in the UK and that. And I tell you, you'll soon recognise me. One, because you'll recognise some of my shirts. But I'd love to come up and we'll share a drink or two and that, and shoot the fan, as they say.
Definitely. Thank you for having me, Roger. I really appreciate it.
No problem at all. Jazz Moods going out on Wednesday nights, Jazz Across the Pond, Kevin Goolsby on Thursday nights. Make sure you're from Richmond, Virginia. You tune into, he's a very good friend of mine. Listen to his music. From myself, Roger Lee, aka the Jazz Cat, and from Patrick Yandall, take care, look after, stay safe, and from everybody here, goodbye.